A few days ago, somebody told me that the RBHR Forum has become a movement. I smiled. I actually, to be honest, also felt proud. And I don't know if it's a movement yet. I do not know if we can write that it is a movement, not just yet. But what I can say for sure, what I can say with a lot of certainty, is that it is fulfilling the purpose that it was meant for. It is fulfilling the vision that it was designed for. The RBHR Forum is not just a gathering. It is a platform. It has come to be a platform for meaningful dialogue among stakeholders from across the region and beyond. More than 2,000 people registered for the forum this year from 109 nationalities with such diverse backgrounds to tune into, to join 60+ sessions that are organized by over 90 collaborators and partners. Just yesterday, which was supposedly day 0 of the forum, we had 840 people checked in from 76 nationalities at the RBHR Forum. And I think that says the scale and scope of what it has become. And none of this would have been possible without all of you who are here, but also from the support and encouragement from our supporters, the government of Sweden, the European Union, the government of Japan, and all our partners and collaborators. Thank you very much for all your support, your encouragement, and your continued leadership in this space. I'm also being very nervous right now with such a large group. The forum really is, the forum has really become a place where we all connect, where we all exchange. The forum has consistently bridged the gaps between the global frameworks and the national realities in Asia and the Pacific. It provides us a place, it provides us a platform to connect, to exchange, but more importantly, to listen. A true dialogue actually could never take place if people from both of the sides do not speak. But for far too long, certain voices, critical voices, have often been left unheard. The rights holders who are at the center, who are at the forefront, who are impacted most by the businesses, are often unheard, unseen in places and even such like this. How can we even begin to imagine? How do we even begin to understand, in absence of them, to find solutions for access to remedy and justice if they're not even in this room? Today, we are addressing those power imbalances. This forum is not just about those who have a microphone just like me here, or people who are at the stage, but it is also for the people who are actually here on this side of the platform, on this side of the stage. It is for all of us. It is about breaking divides. It is about increasing visibility. It is about bringing attention to those who should be at the center of all the conversations around access to remedy and justice. So, before we dive into the agenda for the forum, why don't we hear from the rights holders? And on my left, I have Sarah. Sarah, why don't you tell us what you think are some of the critical barriers in accessing remedy, any solutions that you can suggest and provide us at the forum? Thanks, Sarah. Please, would you introduce yourself as well?
Thank you very much. I am Sarah Bestang Dukdakan. I come from the Igorot indigenous peoples in the Cordillera in the northern part of the Philippines. This Cordillera region has a majority population of indigenous peoples. And in our region, we are currently facing multiple challenges in relation to imposed development projects and increased red tagging and criminalization of our leaders, our organizations, and our communities. I myself am a victim of this criminalization, having to face legal charges for speaking out on violations against rights of indigenous peoples. The culture of impunity in our region remains a big challenge for us indigenous peoples in achieving remedies and justice for violations committed against us and our territories. While majority of the world's indigenous peoples are in Asia, the recognition and respect of our collective rights as enshrined in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples remains dismal. When we indigenous people speak out against such violations, we are subjected to reprisals, criminalization, violence, and abuse. In the Philippines, indigenous peoples are subjected to extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances, trump-up charges, terrorist tagging, and designation as in the case of the Cordillera People's Alliance, militarization, and bombings. All these are happening without due process of law and with impunity. We are facing enormous challenge to the lack of genuine and legal recognition of our rights as indigenous peoples to our lands, our territories, our resources, and self-determination. The laws that violate indigenous peoples' rights should be revoked, and policies that are not consistent with the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples should be reviewed, while protective laws and policies for the protection of defenders for grievances, accountability, and justice should be passed and strengthened. Our indigenous socio-political institutions, justice and governance systems, customary laws, knowledge, values, and practices should be upheld. There must be genuine, free, prior, and informed consent and human rights due diligence in all projects affecting indigenous peoples. In this forum, our engagement should also go beyond tokenistic participation. Consultation with indigenous peoples on thematic priorities based on emerging business and human rights concerns should be conducted. We reiterate that for indigenous peoples, our lands, territories, and resources is our life. Thus, we nurture and defend this for the sake of future generations and of humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. And we just heard some of the key challenges that the indigenous communities, indigenous people face, but we also heard some solutions. So I hope all of us are listening how we can really, really help and improve the situation here and ensure that the rights are being protected for everyone. Now, I did say that the dialogue can only happen if both the sides speak. And while we heard from the rights holders here, meaningful progress, we must also hear from those who bear the responsibility to act, the duty bearers. And with that, I would like to invite Ms. Maya, who's a senior expert in labor relations at the government of Mongolia, to tell us, how do you think government can have the responsibility, but how can government help us ensure that there is access to remedy? But also, Maya, we would love to hear from you. What are some of the key barriers the government is facing in accessing remedy, particularly in this context? And if you have any solutions for the forum participants and the speakers and the organizers here.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I think one of the most critical barriers to achieving effective remedies is reaching small and medium enterprises. SMEs make up large part of the economy, but often they lack the resources and awarenesses needed to engage in human rights due diligence and provide effective remedies. Many operate with limited capacity, and without proper support, they struggle to address human rights issues adequately. We need to provide simple training and support systems that help them understand their role in protecting human rights and environment. Creating easy to use grievance system will also help SMEs handle the complaints more effectively. The second major barrier is the environmental crisis. Harm to environment caused by businesses not acting responsibly hits vulnerable communities and hardest to and makes human rights problems even worse. This makes it harder to pick key issues because we have to deal with both environmental damage and human rights issues at the same time. Youth are leading in the charge of the climate action, bring fresh energy and innovative ideas to the fight for sustainability. By empowering young people, we can drive businesses and governments to adopt more responsible environmental practice. Their activism can create real momentum for change, pushing for greater transparency and accountability. At the same time, the media amplifies their efforts by exposing harmful practice and highlighting environmental damage. By raising public awareness, the medium puts pressure on the companies and governments to act responsibly. Together, youth and the medium form a strong force for both people and the planet. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. In fact, you did highlight some of the key issues that all of us have been struggling with. How do we work with small and medium enterprises, but the role that the youth and media can play in this environment. Now, it would actually be very unfair if we did not provide an opportunity to hear from the stakeholders at the center of many of these conversations, businesses. While concerns are often raised about the negative impacts that the businesses have, but we also must not forget they are also very critical for progress, for development, for innovation, for economic development, right? So I think with that, also, I think it's important for us to remember that the businesses are not just part of the problem. They are actually equally important and vital to the solutions as well. And with that, I would like to hand over the mic to Mr. Kilong Fu, who's the director at TAT, to share his perspective, but really to sort of help us understand business perspective on what you think are the key barriers that businesses are facing in accessing remedy and in facilitating remedies for the rights holders, but also what are some of the solutions that you're working with.
Thank you. My name is Kilong. I'm from Tatwin. We are a SME rubber producer from southern Thailand. Most of the workers we hire are migrant workers. 7 years ago, with the guidance of the IOM resources, and under the guidance of the UNGPs, we implemented policies, human rights due diligence, remediation, grievance mechanism within our manufacturing facilities for our migrant workers. In practice, we were able to remediate them effectively. The reality is, over time, we found that remediation is not just one-off. It's never a clean issue. It's ongoing, it's recurring, it's evolving. One of the critical barriers we found was in executing remediation, we actually, in order to conform to the effectiveness criteria of the UNGP's Principle 31, we actually have to have it to be legitimate, to be transparent, to be quick, to be efficient. And the cost and the time involved in having a third party to witness and to oversee that remediation can be quite costly. Recently, we found a small number of our workers, migrant workers, to have paid for passport fees. We have to engage a third party to remediate them. The cost of remediation itself is the same as the cost of hiring the third party. Thanks to the effort of the entire community, human rights defender, rights holders, CSOs, we have already come to the point of maturing where businesses are having remediation that's more commonplace. Maybe we can look into having the cost of remediation, the remediation being remote, being desk-bound, and that will be more accessible to SMEs like us. And that will reduce the resistance to remediation across the world. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. So we have heard from our stakeholders. We have heard from, thank you very much for sharing the perspectives. I think each one is really important in framing this conversation over the next 4 days. Thank you, everyone, for speaking. Now, we have heard the insights, and we have heard the insights from rights holders. reflections on the conversations that we have just heard, but also as we move forward, what are some of the progresses and how do we take it forward from here? Dr. Pichamon, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for those extremely useful interventions and insightful interventions, and thank you, Harpreet, for giving me the floor. It really gives me such great pleasure to be here on behalf of the UN Working Group on Business and Human Rights to deliver this keynote address to a very passionate and dedicated group of business and human rights experts, practitioners, and leaders. It has been wonderful to see this forum grow in tandem with our annual forum that takes place every year in Geneva in November. And we very much hope that the insights, the contributions, the voices that we see represented here in this room and online, voices from the Asia-Pacific region, that these will reach the discussions that we have in Geneva to help inform not just the regional agenda for business and human rights, but equally the global agenda as well. When it comes to accelerating the implementation of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, there has been no greater need for us to act now, as individuals and as a community. At a time when intersecting challenges from climate change through to shrinking civic space tests the resilience of our societies and of our commitment to upholding the human rights of all. The thematic focus of this year's RBHR Forum is obviously on the third pillar of the UN Guiding Principles, that is, access to remedy. To quote the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, everyone has the right to an effective remedy for acts that violate the fundamental rights granted to people by constitution or by law. And yet, ensuring access to remedy continues to prove elusive in so many places, including here in the Asia-Pacific region. In this region, the patchwork of judicial and non-judicial mechanisms that we see is at present still inadequate to meet all of the needs of rights holders harmed by corporate human rights abuses. And we heard earlier from the human rights defender who spoke about the issues to do with criminalization, as well as the lack of transparency. And there are many more issues, challenges that we see here in this region. This is not to, of course, say that providing effective remedies is at all easy. And speaking to businesses, we as a working group know that they also face hurdles when it comes to understanding how to best design remedial mechanisms. The same can also be said of governments. And so it is really fantastic to see all of us gathered here today, in person and online, to discuss the very important issue of what are the ways forward, what needs to be the blueprint to ensure that access to remedy is a right that is being protected and respected for everyone. You will see later in a video that I believe strongly that without remedy, there will only be impunity. And the reason for this is because the provision of effective remedies for victims of business-related human rights abuses is supposed to result in the strengthening of corporate accountability. So in the absence of remedy, enhancing corporate accountability will continue to be elusive. And I think in light of that, it is extremely important that we recognize that there is no one-size-fits-all approach that can be taken to designing remedy. And we also must acknowledge that when it comes to designing effective remedies, this is only possible if we take into account the voices of rights holders. Because we are gathered here not to think only about the problems, but also to think about the solutions, I would like to end my remarks on a more positive note. Despite all the challenges that we face on the ground, that Indigenous human rights defenders, women human rights defenders in general face, there is always a glimmer of hope. And we see across the Asia-Pacific region progress being made despite these challenges. We see innovative remedial mechanisms coming into place, spearheaded by governments and certainly by the private sector itself. We also see rights holders taking an active, constructive role in informing those discussions and ensuring that the voices of those who stand to be most affected are being integrated into these considerations. And this is what we need to see more of. So I very much hope that over the next few days, we will be able to advance our understanding, but also the practice of remedy. Each and every one of you, you're so integral to this agenda. You are the people who are working on the ground and at the front lines, ensuring that what we say here in this forum doesn't just exist on paper or as rhetoric, but that it translates into reality, that it affects changes that are meaningful to those who need those changes the most. And so with that, thank you so much again for providing myself the opportunity to address all of you today. The working group and I in particular have always found inspiration in the stories that we hear here at the RBHR Forum and in all of our forums. And I would like to say that even when things seem dire or even when there doesn't seem to be much chance of positive change, there is always, again, a glimmer of hope. And there is always, I would say, goodwill to find a way out that benefits those who stand to be most marginalized. And so with that, I will hand it back over to the floor. And thank you so much to colleagues here for joining us. And I very much look forward to engaging with you more in the coming days.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pichramani. And thank you very much indeed. And thank you very much indeed on giving us this glimmer of hope. And I couldn't agree more with you on how inspiring it is, even just yesterday, hearing all of these conversations. And I hope to get inspired over the next few days with all of you. So thank you very much for leaving us with that positive note. Now, with that, we would like to invite Excellency Colonel Tauwi Sotsong, who's the Minister of Justice, Ministry of Justice, Government of Thailand, here to welcome us all in his country and to really deliver the welcome remarks. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Excellency. I feel very pleased and very honored that I'm here with you, with everyone, at the UN Forums on Business and Human Rights. For this UNRBHRF, this year title, Remedy Blueprint, Bridging the Gap and Accelerating Access, organized in collaboration with 8 United Nations agencies. The goal is to provide a platform for exchanging ideas and experiences regarding human rights and transparent, accountable business practices. I am pleased to note that over 1,800 participants from more than 100 countries have registered for this event. I would like to express my gratitude to all the agencies that have collaborated in organizing these important forums. Thailand, as a member of the United Nations, has integrated human rights principles into its constitution, establishing independent constitutional bodies such as National Human Rights Commission of Thailand, which monitors and reports accurate facts on human rights violations. This body also oversees and reports accurate information on remedying the victim of such violation to the relevant public or private sectors agencies. Nevertheless, a human rights court had not yet been established in Thailand. This is a challenge, and there should be a research to further this effort. Human rights violation cases are typically embedded within criminal cases, not considered separately. Furthermore, the judiciary does not have the legal mandate to examine human rights violations, such as substantive issue, but only criminal offenses. As a result, human rights violations are devalued and treated merely as an aspect of criminal cases rather than being addressed as a standalone issue. Thailand, as a member of the United Nations, played a great importance on the continuous advancing human rights. In 2017, the Cabinet assigned the Right and Liberty Protection Department under the Ministry of Justice to take the lead in developing the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights, or we call NAP, to implement the United Nations Guiding Principle on Business and Human Rights, หรือ UNGP. Thailand became the first country in Asia to create a NAP, which set out the responsibility of government to protect its citizens, mandate state enterprise and businesses to respect human rights in their operation, and outline the collective responsibility to provide remedy when violation occur. The development of the NAP is based on the principle of human rights, non-discrimination, transparency, and accountability, and it takes into account Thailand's international human rights obligation to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals (SDG) and other global standards. Currently, Thailand is implementing the second phase of the NAP, covering the year 2023 to 2027. And these phases address 4 key areas.
The first one, labor. This focuses on addressing labor issues such as those faced by the vulnerable groups, including migrant workers, women workers, ethnic groups, seasonal workers, the elderly, and the persons with disabilities, including human trafficking. It also tackles issues such as the aging society, labor welfare, and the rights to organize unions, and revising laws and policies to align with human rights principles. The second one, communities, land, natural resources, and the environment. This aims to ensure effective public consultation and participation before, during, and after projects, assess environmental and health impacts, and address issues such as environmental pollution, waste disposal, and climate change. It also promotes environmental-friendly businesses practice and ensure fair access to natural resources. The third one, human rights defenders. This involves reviewing and improving laws and mechanisms to protect human rights defenders, addressing strategic lawsuits against public participation, SLAPP, and raising awareness of their roles among businesses, government officials, and society. Fourth one, cross-border investments and multinational corporations. This focus on enhancing mechanisms for assessing justice and remedies for human rights violations in business, especially in the context of foreign investments. It also aims to raise awareness among Thai businesses investing abroad to their human rights obligations and prepare Thailand for membership. These 4 key areas are designed with the intention to prepare Thailand for membership in OECD. These 4 key areas are designed with the intention of eliminating business-related human rights violations in Thailand. All that I have outlined reflect the strong determinations of Thai government through the Ministry of Justice to advance policies and laws and promote rules of law and human rights in alignment with the UN standards in business sector. Today's forum is an excellent opportunity for government, state enterprise, business and civil society to collaborate and exchange knowledge, experience, ensuring that business practices respect and protect human rights of all people. In this rapidly evolving business landscape, effective remedies must also be urgently provided. As the Minister of Justice, I extend my heartfelt thanks to all the sectors and countries that have supported this event, and I hope that this forum will lead to concrete actions to accelerate respect, protection, and provisions of remedies for human rights violations in business. Today's forum is an excellent opportunity to let all the parties involved collaborate in order to get an effective result. And the remedy is not only by providing financial remedy, but also in other aspects. And I thank all of the participants for joining this Business and Human Rights Forum. And I officially welcome you to the 6th Responsible Business and Human Rights Forum. And I wish Forum every success in achieving its goals. Thank you.
It would be difficult to have all of many of these different agencies coming here and speaking, but all of our regional directors would like to welcome you all to the UN Responsible Business and Human Rights Forum, and we have a short video from them. Excellencies, dignitaries, distinguished guests, speakers, and colleagues. On behalf of the co-organizers, I would like to extend you all a very warm welcome to the 2024 Asia Pacific United Nations Responsible Business and Human Rights Forum. This year, we're excited to bring together people from across the region to draw attention to the essential third pillar on access to remedy.
Over the past few years, the adoption and implementation of the business and human rights principle have made considerable progress across Asia and the Pacific. However, this progress remains hampered, partly because access to remedy and justice that is so fundamental is being limited, constrained. And therefore, we need to do more to have human rights embedded in business practices, partly for those who are most marginalized, most vulnerable. And we must also do more to ensure that when harms occur, effective remedy is within reach for all.
Business, human rights, and the triple planetary crisis of climate change, nature loss, and pollution are deeply intertwined. The private sector has a responsibility to understand the potential impact of the operations on affected communities and to collaborate with those who work to protect the environment. And in cases where environmental rights violations may have occurred, governments and businesses must provide access to effective remedy. Ensuring access to justice and the ability to obtain redress from grievances advances the realization of the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment.
We envision an East Asian Pacific region where every girl and boy grows up safe and with boundless opportunities. Imagine a place where children's rights are not only respected, but actively championed in every business decision. In this future, environmental pollution and harmful practices are eliminated, and every child is shielded from the worst impacts of climate change. To turn this vision into reality, we must integrate children's rights into all business practices and decisions. It doesn't just make ethical sense, it also makes business sense. By placing children's rights at the core of our decisions, we uplift not only economies, but also entire society.
By bringing together governments, employers, and workers, we seek to bridge gaps and accelerate access to effective remedy that is integral to ensuring fair societies and prosperous economies. Key to this is strengthening labor market governance and promoting respect for international labor standards. We must also ensure access to effective workplace mechanisms that encourage dialogue and remediate disputes and grievances arising from business operations. Only through this collective endeavor can we build trust and foster the responsible business ecosystem required to ensure a more inclusive future of work for all.
Access to justice is fundamental in realizing human and labor rights for all, especially migrant workers. They deserve accessible grievance mechanisms and effective remedies without fear of retaliation. Digital tools can empower them to seek justice across borders. With migrant workers at higher risk of forced labor, collaborative efforts are crucial to addressing systemic challenges and gaps in the grievance and remedy ecosystem, balancing corporate accountability with state intervention in severe abuse cases. By uniting governments, companies, and civil society, we can drive systemic change and uphold migrant workers' rights in business operation and global supply chains.
The right to access effective remedy is a core principle of international human rights law and standards. However, its implementation in the region, including within the access to remedy pillar of the UN Guiding Principles, remains uneven. Access to remedy for business-related human rights violations and harm must go hand in hand with accountability. It is critical that states, businesses, private entities, and other economic actors reduce barriers to remedies for right holders at all times. We are committed to support human rights defenders, civil society actors, affected individuals, and communities who seek accountability and remedy, and to work together with governments and businesses, promoting human rights due diligence, increased transparency, and accountability of businesses in line with international standards.
Despite progress in gender equality across Asia and the Pacific region, cultural norms still hinder women's ability to enter, remain in, and thrive in the workplace. Tackling these complex issues requires coordinated action at all societal levels, with the private sector playing a game-changing role in advancing a real and lived gender equality. Concrete policies are needed to ensure that women at every level have the agency to report grievances and access remedies. By promoting inclusive and safe work environments, we are committed to enable women and all employees to flourish, participate fully in the economy, and achieve true equality.
No silver bullet solution exists for business-related human rights abuses. Indeed, the Access to Remedy pillar of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights reminds us that not all abuses will be prevented. In addition to demanding corporate accountability and strengthening protection systems, it is critical that victims are provided with effective remedies and assured justice. But achieving this often proves most difficult where the need is greatest. In the Asia-Pacific, the current remedial machinery is inadequate to meet the needs of rights holders harmed by corporate abuse. Changing this reality is a tremendous challenge, one that needs to be addressed in its parts and as a whole. We must confront this challenge together, because without remedy, there will only be impunity.
We can no longer afford to fall short on remedy.
Because justice delayed is justice denied.
We must come together to design blueprint for action
that ensures gender-responsive accountability for harms done
and prevents future harm to people and the planet.
Action that strengthens access to remedy.
The time is now
to advance action that will bridge existing gaps,
accelerate access to remedy for all rights holders,
and ensure that no one is left behind.
There are no rights without remedy.
Join us in this shared commitment.
Let us act now, united and unwavering, to make access to remedy a reality for all.
Thank you very much. And I think if one message that I could take from this is that business and human rights agenda indeed intersects with all of our mandates, with all of our priorities. And coordination and collaboration, even among the UN agencies, is the only way forward. And I think RBHR Forum is a step really in the right direction. So thank you very much to all of our directors and our leadership for their continued support and encouragement as well. We will now move on to the next section of the opening section here. And I would like to invite Excellency Ms. Anna Hammargren, Ambassador, Embassy of Sweden in Thailand, to please deliver her opening remarks. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, Minister of Justice, Excellencies, Madam Minister, Mr. Vice Minister, dear guests, colleagues, organizers, contributors to this forum, Sawadee Ka, as we say in Thailand, and most welcome for those of you who do not live in this beautiful country to this forum. It is really my honor to address you all this morning with some brief opening remarks. And I think we already heard some good examples and good contributions from the floor, so this is very promising for the forum as such. As ambassador, I cover many policy areas in my everyday work, and today is a good day. Because when I'm sitting here in front of you, giving these opening remarks, it's actually a proof of linking between my different agendas. It's political diplomacy, it's trade promotion, and it's development cooperation. I see how these become very, very tangible. We're here to work with what could be seen as a delicate balance, and that is, of course, to promote economic development on the one side, and on the other, to uphold and respect human rights. We know that this cannot be either or either scenario. It's all effectively achieving both. And the topic isn't new. It's been 13 years since the adoption of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. And it's even 24 years ago since the founding of the UN Global Compact. And this today is the 6th UN Regional Business and Human Rights Forum. Progress has been made, of course, But too often still, victims of human rights abuses face unacceptable barriers in seeking remedy. And human rights defenders who advocate for corporate accountability are met sometimes with harassment, intimidation, or even violence. Addressing these challenges require a coordinated effort from government, business, civil society, trade unions, academics, and international organizations. And we're all present here today. Sweden has for long been working to advance business and human rights at home and abroad, and also, of course, with partners in this region. It is fantastic to know that in this room we see many partners in that endeavor. It's the UN Forum of Co-Organizers, it's Fair Finance Asia, APWLD, AIPP, ICJ, the Forum Asia, Earth Rights International, and so on. This is just to mention a few. We also have the International Council for Swedish Industry, the big company H&M, and the Swedish Industrial and Metal Workers Union participating with us here in the meeting. So Sweden's investments in responsible business and human rights are significant and come in many different shapes and forms. Yes, we have to work together. We say that all the time, but what does it really mean? And how can we get there? There is definitely no lack of buzzwords in this world. I know that you know that. Innovative approaches, cross-sectoral collaboration, synergies, we all use them. And we want to put meaning to them, I hope. And my hope is also for this forum, and my challenge to us all, is to move past the buzzwords. Dare to get concrete. We've already heard some good concrete examples. And this means stepping out of your comfort zone sometimes. Make an effort to understand each other's buzzwords. Talk to someone you would not usually approach. Ask the silly or sensitive questions. If we don't challenge ourselves on an individual level, we're likely to be having the same conversations about the need we cannot afford. Now, today we have evidence that when business commit to human rights principles and embrace ethical practices, they secure long-term viability and success. But we have also learned that when regulatory frameworks and limitations in civic space allows for accountability mechanisms to fail, the notion of responsible business as equal to successful business starts to crumble. So there is no responsible business without good legal systems, an open civil society, and proper access to remedy for those adversely affected by business operations. Governments across the Asia-Pacific region are taking steps towards addressing these challenges, as we just heard also from His Excellency the Minister. The development of national action plans on business and human rights is important to align practices with international human rights standards. With legislation for responsible business practices now increasingly being introduced on the global scene, the implementation of these national action plans becomes even more imperative. Not least from a business perspective, we need value chains for robust environmental and human rights due diligence. And when I say we, I'm of course also talking about my own country, Sweden. As a comparatively small, trade-dependent country with high standards for responsible business and human rights, the implementation of business and human rights principles globally and throughout this region is very much in our interest, not only from a development cooperation perspective, but also from a trade perspective. And that is, of course, for mutual benefit. Asian suppliers and business partners are already playing a key role for Swedish companies. And we see major potential for further investments in this region, not least in contributing with innovation and green technology for a just and green solution. Such investments are largely facilitated by a conducive business environment, including transparency and accountability mechanisms. Sweden's commitment to human rights and responsible business practices is, of course, also development cooperation. And I would like to express my deepest appreciation for our long-standing collaboration with the UNDP and other UN agencies. And I'm very happy to see the One UN concept here very well visualized in the film we just saw. And I'd also like to thank our civil society partners and private sector partners for your hard work in pushing this agenda forward over the last years. Many are active in the space today, and we are encouraged by the progress we have seen and truly impressed by all your efforts. Before I end, I want to take the opportunity to also extend my deep respect to those who have been affected by misconduct and yet continue to raise your voices despite numerous challenges. Your unwavering courage to speaking out, even in the face of adversity, is essential to driving this change that we need. Your presence at this forum is vital, and we look forward to hearing your stories and supporting you in the days ahead. So, thank you all for being here today, and I wish us all a very fruitful meeting. Kapkunka.
Thank you, Ambassador. So I hope during the next 3 days, we are able to step out of our comfort zone and we are able to have difficult conversations, but these are really, really important conversations. And we hope that we can maintain a respectful environment where we can hear everyone with equal opportunities. So thank you very much, Ambassador, for that note for us. We now have with us Excellency Mr. Michael Sweers, Vice Minister for Foreign Economic Relations, Government of Netherlands. Excellency, can I please invite you to share your opening remarks? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this wonderful forum. It's a privilege to have the chance to connect with everyone together. And let me start right away with my main message, why I appreciate it so much to being able to attend this meeting. And if you remember one thing of my speech, then please let that be this message. So this issue, responsible business conduct, business and human rights, is close at heart for the Netherlands. It has always been, but I would say it was particularly triggered in 2013 after the Rana Plaza incident, where more than 1,000 people were killed. And we really felt the urgency to do something. This is not only a problem for production countries. This is a shared responsibility. We have a role to play. And we are a small country as the Netherlands, but we have big multinationals. We are very active in trade. We have a strong presence in this region. So this is also our responsibility. And today I want to inform you about something that we came up with recently, and if I say we, I mean the European Union in this respect, and I refer to the CSDDD, and I will elaborate what that is. My message is, this is European regulation, but we have to cooperate to make it successful. We have to cooperate to achieve the goals of this directive. Sustainability and fair value chains. And let me be clear. This regulation is not made to protect EU producers. It is not made to drive out SMEs in the regions out of business. We want to improve businesses. We want to work in a different way, more sustainable and more fair. So this is an invitation. Work with us during the implementation of this regulation. Cooperate to make it a success and achieve the goals that we're aiming for. We are willing to step out of our comfort zone and work together with businesses, governments, and NGOs. So I really appreciate the opportunity here today to discuss and advance the agenda of businesses and human rights, and particularly with regard to achieving effective access to remedy in the Asia-Pacific region. I'm learning a lot already, and I'm pleased to tell you about the Netherlands' approach to our shared responsibility for businesses and human rights. So many of you know that 2024 has been an important year for this topic in the European Union, and therefore in the Netherlands as well. The EU Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, CSDDD, came into force in July, a milestone for business and human rights. It is the first regional due diligence law ever, and it did not come about without a struggle. And that's understandable, because the directive has implications for businesses as well, not less importantly, for our partner countries. The CSDDD is a positive development for them all. The legislation supports resilient global value chains that respect planetary boundaries and human rights. It creates a level playing field for EU companies, promoting transparency and predictability in business conduct and contributing to decent conditions for people and environmental protection. This legislation is not an obstacle to do business, not even in difficult circumstances. It aims to promote responsible engagement rather than irresponsible disengagement, and to promote the development of resilient global value chains and sustainable earning capacity for all companies and countries. And as we know, companies that operate sustainably also have better long-term prospects for profitability. But at the same time, we do see the challenges and concerns. Implementing this legislation depends on maintaining a close connection with partner countries, especially in this region, the global epicenter of manufacturing. We've learned from past experience, including in the Netherlands, and have worked to ensure that this law has a positive impact everywhere, taking inspiration from the UN's guiding principles on business and human rights, so that the level playing field for EU companies also translates into better outcomes for our partner countries and businesses worldwide. For instance, the directive requires EU companies to investigate their own practices rather than shift obligations to more vulnerable business partners, upstream, including those in production countries. It calls for EU companies to support their business partners in the value chain, especially SMEs, in order to raise production standards. And it explicitly includes the obligation to address concerns about living income and wages. This is a key issue in addressing wider due diligence risks. Implementing this directive is complex, and we recognize that international cooperation is indispensable here. Accompanying measures can help to provide a soft landing CSDDD and to support businesses and partner countries. And this is what we are striving for, both at a national and a European level, by financing activities that support businesses in partner countries in partnership with Dutch companies, to increase productivity, competitiveness, and environmental and social production standards. In the coffee, palm oil, and textile value chains, for example, we work together with international NGOs based in the Netherlands, such as IDH, Solidaridad, and Fairware. This strengthens cooperation between Dutch, European, and international companies across the value chain and traders, manufacturers, plantations, small farmers in countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, and Bangladesh. The technical assistance and funding provided through these organizations helped to boost productivity and resilience among producers, so that they can respond both to local environmental and social challenges and to the EU market demand. Furthermore, living income and wages, pricing and procurement practices by Dutch, European and international businesses have to be addressed to make a business case across the entire value chain. We are also actively involved in a Team Europe initiative in which the European Commission and Member States work to support business and stakeholders in partner countries, by establishing a help desk to promote understanding of the CSDDD and highlight support they could tap into, provided by the EU and its member states. However, we must also consider the possibility of things going wrong. The CSDDD was adopted in part because universal human rights standards are not upheld everywhere to the same degree. And even if protections are in place and European companies exercise due diligence, abuses can still occur. In these cases, it is important that companies have a chance to learn and improve and offer suitable remedy mechanisms for the people affected. And that brings me to the main topic of this forum. achieving effective access to remedy. In this respect, the CSDDD is a landmark law. It requires companies to provide remediation when harm has been done and to set up complaint mechanisms open to all stakeholders. It also gives a supervisory authority the power to order remediation. And as a last resort, victims can hold companies liable in a civil court. In short, access to remedy is firmly enshrined in the law, bringing impact on the ground one step closer. And of course, we must also look to the future, because our work is not done. It would be good if the CSDDD served as its inspiration for other countries. I know that several countries in this region have expressed interest in adopting similar legislation. We support such endeavors and stand ready to engage with you, so that companies worldwide contribute to the well-being of people and the environment, and to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Together we can work towards a legislative due diligence framework that contributes to a global level playing field and sustainable earning capacity for our companies in all parts of the value chain. As for us, we will continue working with partner countries to ensure that our legislation does not pose an excessive burden, yet still achieve its aims, such as better protection of human rights by businesses. So I'd like to invite you, as our partners, to share your suggestions on how we can ensure the success of this legislation. We are open to dialogue, precisely because we are so invested in ensuring a positive impact for all involved, including here in the Asia-Pacific region. Because after all, ensuring respect for human rights in the value chain is a shared responsibility. And I'm looking forward to have that conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Minister. In fact, and thank you for reminding us the 2013 Rana Plaza building collapse. And indeed, this is the 40th anniversary of the Bhopal gas tragedy. And victims are still accessing, they're still asking for remedies and seeking justice. So I think it's an important reminder for all of us that we don't want to, that we don't need to have these anniversaries, but the victims must have the right to remedy and justice. And international cooperation is, of course, important, and we look forward to sort of engaging with all of you here. And now I would like to invite Excellency Ms. Sara Rezogali. She's the acting head of mission at the delegation of European Union to Thailand. Ms. Sara, the floor is yours for the opening remarks, please.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, Minister of Justice, Your Excellency, Vice Minister, dear colleagues, distinguished participants. It's really a privilege for me to participate on behalf of the European Union in this year's edition of this very important forum on responsible business and human rights for Asia Pacific. First of all, I would like to thank and congratulate the UN family, UNDP, IOM, UN Women, UNHCR, UNICEF, UNEP, for organizing this very important event and for inviting us to participate. And all stakeholders who are here in this room, thank you very much. As you know, the European Union has been for a long time at the forefront of promoting human rights within the global business framework. Building on earlier policies on corporate social responsibility, the EU in the past year has advanced towards mandatory legal requirements on business and human rights based on agreed international standards. Several recently adopted pieces of EU legislation, such as the Critical Raw Materials Act, the Digital Services Act, or the Artificial Intelligence Act, include due diligence requirements as a tool for companies to address potential negative impacts on human rights. The Vice Minister has really facilitated my task, which was to talk about CSDDD. So thank you for introducing. This is a very, very important new directive on corporate sustainability due diligence that recently entered into force. It marks the latest significant step forward in the European Union efforts to provide a framework for due diligence in the value chain. The directive builds on the work done by the United Nations in the framework of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, as well on ICD initiatives on responsible business conduct and on ILO endeavors on decent work. The directive represents a significant step forward in our collective efforts to ensure that business practices respect human rights. It introduced legal obligations for all companies with links to EU to conduct human rights and environmental due diligence. It seeks to ensure that companies operating within the EU, first of all, or companies with significant business ties to the EU market, take responsibilities for their impact on human rights and on the environment. It establishes a comprehensive due diligence framework requiring business to identify, prevent, and mitigate any adverse impact on human rights and the environment throughout their operational and supply chains. The EU directive on corporate due diligence will provide a uniform legal framework and ensure a level playing field for companies across the EU single market. The rules will also foster international competitiveness, increase innovation, and ensure legal certainty for companies addressing sustainability impacts. The directive is not to be interpreted as punitive. On the contrary, it is a significant opportunity to promote responsible business practices across the value chains, including in Asia and the Pacific. By adopting robust due diligence practices, the companies in the region can secure long-term market advantages, enhance supply chain resilience, and attract more sustainable investment. Demand for ethical business practices grows globally, so respecting human rights is good for business. In addition, a critical feature of the CSDDD is its provision for civil liability, which empowers victims of corporate harm to seek legal remedy. So it obliges companies to provide remediation, and in this sense it's very relevant to today's theme. Continued efforts are now needed to ensure that the directive leads to a sustainable impact, and it needs the cooperation of all stakeholders. This includes investing in responsible purchasing practices and supporting SMEs through capacity building, long-term business relationship and partnership, and financial incentives. The European Union is really committed to supporting measures for meaningful due diligence on the ground, and we are ready to engage with all stakeholders. We will continue working closely with governments in Asia and the Pacific in light of the key role that authorities have to play by introducing supportive legislation, policy reforms, and strengthening institutional capacity, with the goal to create a regulatory environment. In Thailand, the EU delegation is closely cooperating with the Ministry of Justice on its intent to develop a corporate sustainability law for Thailand. Civil society organizations are equally indispensable in our joint efforts, particularly in advocating for the victims of corporate harm and holding businesses accountable. Particular attention is needed to ensure an enabling environment for civil society and rights holders to speak out without fear of reprisal. At the same time, we will continue working with many of which are here today in this room, to operationalize this commitment through targeted projects. The EU has been supporting a number of initiatives in the region on business and human rights, in close partnerships with businesses, governments, the civil society, and the United Nations to provide access to remedy. The recently launched initiative in partnership with UNDP, Agents of Change, Youth and Media for Responsible Business Practices, will work in the next 3 years in 4 countries in Asia, including Thailand, to enhance engagement of youth and media as key drivers of change. We recently also launched a 3-year project on responsible business conduct for green, digital, and resilient supply chains in Asia in partnership with OECD. And we have additional ongoing projects in this field with our partners from ILO, IOM, UN Women, UNICEF, and UNODC, tackling topics such as decent work and reducing vulnerabilities for women and children in the context of labor migration in Southeast Asia, on promoting corporate responsibility and migrant workers' rights in supply chains, and on labor migration in the fishing sector in Southeast Asia. Please allow me to conclude by expressing hope that this year's forum will encourage a concrete and active contribution from different sectors and provide us with further food for thought on how to jointly build a future in which the respect for human rights and for environment are integral and mainstreamed in all business operations. I wish the forum a very fruitful discussion today and in the coming days, and I would like to thank everyone for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sarah. In fact, we do have a few sessions aligned on Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, and I would encourage all of you to join. One of them is actually an interesting debate on what are its implications in Asia. Now, last but not the least, I would like to invite His Excellency, Mr. Tatsushi Nishikawa, Deputy Chief of Mission, Embassy of Japan in Thailand, to please deliver his opening remarks. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Today's gathering is particularly significant as it focuses on a theme that lies at the heart of responsible business conduct, remedy for human rights abuses. It is crucial that as we promote responsible business practices, we also ensure that mechanisms are in place to provide meaningful remedies when human rights are violated. The Asia-Pacific is a region of tremendous economic opportunity. However, with rapid growth comes responsibility to ensure that development is fair, inclusive, and respects the dignity of all individuals. The government of Japan, along with its partners, strongly supports the power of collaboration between governments, businesses, and civil society to foster a shared commitment to the promotion of human rights in the context of business and human rights. Japan is committed to advancing responsible business conduct as a matter of fundamental principle, as well as improving international competitiveness of our businesses. In the year 2020, Japan adopted our National Action Plan of Business and Human Rights, a key step in aligning our effort with the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. These principles emphasize three core pillars: the state's duty to protect human rights, businesses' responsibility to respect human rights, and critically, the right to remedy for victims of human rights abuses. Ensuring access to effective remedy should be central to building trust between businesses and the communities they serve. Further strengthening this effort, the government of Japan published the guidelines on respecting human rights in responsible supply chains in the year 2022. These guidelines offer practical advice for companies to prevent human rights violations and, equally importantly, provide clear avenues for addressing and remediating any abuses that may occur. This is a critical part of responsible business, ensuring that when harm occurs, affected individuals have access to fair and effective remedies, whether through judicial or non-judicial means. To underscore our commitment to promoting human rights across the business sector, Japan, as presidency of the G7 in 2023, reaffirmed the importance of promoting such rights in the leaders' communique adopted at the summit in Hiroshima. We have been actively engaging on this matter with many countries in this region through organizations such as UNDP, IOM, and ILO. Japan is thus committed to continue working closely with the United Nations and other relevant stakeholders in promoting the global business and human rights agenda, and keen to work with such stakeholders to help restore dignity and provide justice to those whose rights have been infringed. I look forward to the insightful exchanges that will emerge from this forum as we work together to build a future where businesses contribute to a more sustainable and just world. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these insightful remarks. And thank you for these great introductions and opening remarks at the beginning. I think this gives us hope, but also it gives us some directions on what we are hoping in the next few days. I'm aware, I've just been told that the Minister of Justice has to leave for another appointment. So if we could maybe just take a group photo here for the opening panel before we move on to the next segment of the opening session. Sorry. Could you maybe just please stand, and I think the photographers will just take a group photo, and then the Minister would have to leave in a minute. All right. Thank you very much.